People, how are you guys doing? Happy Friday to everybody. It is time for another episode of He Said, a look at the world from a seasoned Black man perspective. I'm waiting for some of you to get online. I know that you all are here and looking for this show tonight as we start our series on managing your health. And let me see I'm waiting to see if you guys are online, coming in. We got a good show for you all today. I hope everybody has enjoyed your week. It has definitely been another trying, newsworthy week. And we've all been a part of it. Hey, Keith, I see some folks are coming in. Hey, Keith, how you doing? Let's see if we can get some more folks in here as we begin our series on managing your health. We got a special guest here tonight, everybody, that we're excited about. Our first special guest, and it is very special, believe it or not. Hey, Keith. So we're trying to get some more folks in here before we move forward. But there has, like I said, been a lot going on, and I want to share some of that with you, but we're going to wait a couple of minutes until we get some folks in. Jacques, Vash, and I have been working really hard on this Managing Your Health series, and we're excited about it. I'm learning a lot about it, about the different segments and the different topics that we can talk about for managing your health. And it is very important to all of us. And tonight's show is really important because we're going to focus on our mental health. So I just want everybody to take what you can from it, stay through the whole show, ask us questions, and if you like, so that we can respond to your questions on our What Y'all Said. Hey, Darnell, how you doing? Welcome to the He Said platform. So once again, because I'm going to go ahead and start, everybody. Again, I'm Alvin King, and welcome to the He Said show. Our show tonight is Managing Your Health. That is our series, and we are focusing on mental health awareness. I wanted to start the show also by paying tribute to two more lives that were lost this week, particularly today. We lost Prince Philip, who was 99 years old in the UK. That's going to be pretty interesting, that funeral that's coming up with all the, focus being on the Brits. And we also lost a pioneer in the hip hop community. He's a Mount Vernon born native in New York hip hop rapper. DMX died today at 50, everybody. So, please, we offer our condolences from the He Said live show, and we do send up a prayer for all of them and their family. And before I bring in my co-host today, ladies and gentlemen, please do a wellness check on some folks that you haven't talked to. Don't be so caught up in, being mad if you got a beef with somebody, or just if you haven't talked to somebody in a long time and you just feel like you're waiting for them to call you. Pick up the phone and call them. See how they're doing. Do it for you. Even if you think you're going to get some kickback from them, pick up the phone and call them. It will do you good, like milk. Okay. All that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bring in my fabulous co-host. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Jacques Whitfield and Mr. Vash Bodhi. Come on in here, guys. How you guys doing?
Hey, how's it going? Happy Friday, yet again.
Happy Friday. I got a lot going on. How about you guys?
Man, I am blessed and challenged at the same time. And challenged with managing enough time to do all the things we get to do.
Yeah. Well, look, for this catch up, you guys, I have a question. I got a question that has been like rising up in me. So everybody's getting their vaccines and whatnot, and the whole world is changing and really revolving around people not or getting their vaccine. So I just have a straightforward question to both of you. Should public venues make it mandatory for people to use an app or have to show their COVID vaccination cards to enter their establishments?
I think it depends. I think it depends on the type of venue, and I think it depends on the type of the event. I'm someone, and I know we've talked about this in the past, I'm someone who's been vaccinated. I got the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the one-shot deal. So one and done. I feel amazing. I got it earlier this week. But from a public health perspective, in the same way that we managed when students were coming into the K-12 education system to make sure that you had your measles shot, your polio shot, diphtheria, all the things, I think it only makes sense from a public health perspective to make sure that people are protecting and that we are protecting the public. And this pandemic has been, no pun intended, but worldwide. And so I would think it would be our moral responsibility, our responsibility in terms of our social and civic responsibilities to make sure that we are creating safe spaces out in the public, particularly large public gatherings. So that's generally where I stand. I understand that there's choice and there should be choice in all of these things. But honestly, I think for some of the big ticket items and when it comes to the safety of the public, I think I see nothing wrong with those types of regulations.
Okay. How about you, Vash?
My question is, how would you enforce that? We can't even enforce people checking to make sure that people wear masks. How can we possibly expect that these venues are going to require people to get vaccinated? That would be a crazy experience.
Well,
Yeah,
that is, I think what you just said, Vash, does make sense. But the question becomes, how do you enforce that? And my thing is, if you own the establishment, you have a right to say who comes in and who doesn't.
So you're saying that you're asking if establishments can require or that they should require?
No, my question was, what do you say, if they make it mandatory that you have to show an app saying that you got the vaccination or show your COVID card in order to even buy a ticket to come in? I'm saying that, it may get to that. And there are people out there who feel like, first of all, they're talking about, I'm sure there are people out there who feel like, well, why should I do that? You didn't do that I don't have to show a card to say I have HIV. I don't have to show a card to say that I got the flu shot. I don't have to say that I show a card to say I got the pneumonia shot. Well, first of all, none of them are COVID. Okay, we're talking about a separate individual virus that has killed over, I guess I'm going to say roughly 730,000 people. And so it's different. So that's my answer to people who say that. But I'm talking about.
I think where there's a.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think where there's a will, there's a way. We manage it in public education. We require students to have shot immunization record, that standard operating procedure. I think it can be done. I think it can be done in a way that's not intrusive. But also, I think, like I said, it depends on the venue. It depends on the situation. And I think it should be done to give people an option. Like if you choose not to go into the venue, then do you have an option? Like say, for example, if it's a concert, if you're not permitted to the concert, can you at least stream it live so that you have an option that you're not totally precluding someone from the experience. However, to be in the in-person experience, because of what we've experienced in the pandemic over the last year and a half, I do believe that some of these steps are reasonable, and I think it can be done.
Yeah, I agree. I think it can be done, but I know that there are people who feel like this is a violation on them, that this is a violation on their privacy. But at the same time, who gives you the right to put someone's life in jeopardy? That you don't have that right. And so when I look at it from that perspective, I do agree that venues have the right to do that. Again, if you own the venue, then you have the right to make those guidelines and say that, you can't come in here unless you do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. But I think that's where we're headed. And I think that's going to be a huge topic moving forward. So I just wanted to see what you guys think, because I mean, you guys' opinion is important to me. Okay.
Well, I know there's a lot of conversation too about the whole COVID passport. And so I'm a person who loves to travel. It was a no-brainer for me. I mean, and plus I have the vaccine, and you have to, when you go to other countries, if you have to take shots to get visas, that just all seemed reasonable to me and wasn't beyond the scope. So, you know, I'm ready to see what further develops. I think, like you said, Alvin, it's going to be an interesting topic that we'll be dealing with for quite some time.
Yeah. Hey, look, you know, before we get started, look, we got a good group we got Robert Beatty on here. We got Rita Burns on here. We got Keith Jackson on here. We got Carol Marie Gary. We have Bo Bogart. We have Derwin Cherry, or Derwin Edward, Derwin Cherry. We have Darnell Henderson. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. This is a very important series that we're starting called Managing Your Health. And our topic for tonight is mental health awareness. And very special for us, we have our first special guest tonight, our subject matter expert on this topic that we're going to discuss. And so if you guys are ready, I want to jump into it. And for those of you who are watching, after we finish the topic, we have a segment called What Y'all Said. Please stick around. Our special guest is going to answer questions, and put your questions in the segment here, and we will get to them because we really want to hear from you. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, joining us tonight is Dr. Donita Holmes. She's a licensed clinical social worker with a degree in industrial organizational psychology with a specialization in organizational psychology. She has been providing licensed mental health services for over 20 plus years to children, adolescents, and families. And the most important thing here is she is one of 3 doctors in my family. Okay, she's my second oldest niece. And so I am grateful and humble to have you, my subject matter expert here tonight, Dr. Donita Holmes. Thank you, Donita. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Welcome.
Welcome. Yeah. Good to have you.
So, Donita, I'm going to, ladies and gentlemen, we only have a few questions that we want to ask her in this segment, but believe me, this series will carry on. So I'm going to start where I had to be most educated. And my first question to you, Donita, is what is the difference between mental health and mental illness?
Okay, so when you think about mental health and mental illness, the easiest way to distinguish between the two is that mental health applies to everybody. Mental health is what you think about when you think about your physical health. Whereas mental illness is something that is more serious, clinical in nature, and requires an actual diagnosis in order to be considered suffering from a mental illness. So where we're focusing on mental health, it's about your well-being. I know one of the things that I do when we talk about mental health is your ability. How do you cope with everyday life? Typical things that may come about in a day, stresses, is how you kind of check the temperature on your mental health. How do you think, feel? How do you act? How do you make decisions day to day? Is checking in and applicable to your mental health as well. Are you able to remain productive in your daily life? That is also tied to your mental health as well.
I like that comment you made about checking your temperature on mental health. I like that. There are a lot of people who can hear what you just said, and to me, you put it in the most simplest ABC format, and they will still have questions when it comes time for, let's say, them to be evaluated, and they will give you some pushback because they just cannot separate the two. How do you deal with those people? How do you deal with those people who just cannot separate mental health from mental illness when they have issues?
Well, it's a community responsibility, and it actually gets tied to the stigma that's associated with mental health in general. So one of the ways when I discuss mental health, I don't even use the words mental health. I use emotional wellness. If you talk about physical health, I prefer to use terms that remove some of the stigma that's associated from the word mental, because typically people look at mental as they automatically associate it with crazy or using negative labels. So I try to find words that help reduce the stigma that's tied to mental health by using words like emotional wellness, by connecting and tying it to their physical health. It's not separate from physical health. It is conjoined and a part of their physical health. When we talk about mind, body, and spirit, the mind and body piece is what we're focusing on. Then it's incorporated. You can't talk about physical health without talking about your emotional wellness as well. They're too closely interrelated and tied not to have that discussion.
Okay. Jacques, bye.
I love that. I love how, in fact, I'm taking notes. I'm a nerd. So this is really helpful to me. And I love what you said about emotional wellness, because that really resonated, because that just lands so nicely. And everybody can say, yes, I'm concerned about yes, I'm concerned about my emotional wellness. But I find, and you mentioned stigma a couple of times in terms of how that is a thing with mental, especially in the Black community. So from your perspective as a professional, how do you actively advocate, or how do you personally deal with that stigma when it comes to mental health and pushing past those barriers so that people actually get the supportive services that they need?
One, working with our community, working with people of color, and connecting with them by allowing them to see someone else who looks like them, who's an advocate. And then again, using terms that normalizes mental health and takes away that stigma is really important. And having a discussion, trying to present things to people in ways by giving them parallels. I'll give someone parallels. If you will go to the doctor for preventive care, to every year you get preventive checkups, right? When they go into doctor's offices now, majority of them, I would say 90% of them, they have a screening that most people may not be aware of, but they're screening for your mental health anyway. And really? Just helping them to understand what that means and what they're checking in on and what's the purpose of that. And the more that you're integrating that into the physical health realm, it normalizes it. It makes it something that's common for people to say, oh, okay, this is like me going in to, buy vitamins because I want to make sure I have all the nutrients that I have. Okay, let's check to see how am I managing my day-to-day workload and family life. Are things, am I coping well? Am I, able to address and make decisions and still function and give back to my community?
Well, that's an interesting segue, because I'm really curious as to how do you measure good emotional wellness? Okay.
So,
how about that?
Oh no, that's a good question. And I'll answer that in the context of if you're able to deal with life stressors and you have some protective factors in your life, those things could be faith. Those things could be little things that you do, like bubble baths or reading, things that are calming, anything that you use to help you deal with life's challenges. I'll never say, which always ties back into stigma. I never use words like normal with people, because your normal is not my normal.
Thank you.
I'll use words like typical, or what's typical for you, or what's common for you. And when you think about the things that you do to kind of manage that day to day, if it helps you to kind of resolve and still function, still make those decisions, regardless of the challenges, that means you have good mental health.
Even if wine is the thing that you use to help you with those challenges?
Absolutely.
Rock on.
Absolutely.
I like that.
I have like a personal story with Darnita, and I can tell you the year. It was 2018. And, I consider myself, I started getting, taking care of my mental health when I was 30 years old. And at 57, I thought I had it all together. I went through one of the worst breakups that I thought, okay, I think I got my crap together. But anyway, as the universe would have it, I had to drive down to North Carolina to sing. And I thought, well, let me go visit my niece. Now, not knowing that she was going to handle me this way, I walked in and she looked at me like, okay, you're a hot mess. But since I'm your niece, I'm not going to tell you that you're a hot mess. So what I'm going to do is basically she gave me words that literally, I mean, first of all, I owe you. Okay, I never paid you for that therapy session. Okay, but she checked me so well by using the right words that I needed to hear to help me get through a situation that I thought I had total control of. And it was all about my mental wellness. And when she checked me and told me that I was looking for something that didn't exist, I almost got in my car and drove home, but I thought I better stay with her a little bit longer. So that is my personal story with her, with y'all, about working or having her actually walk the talk that she's talking right now about how she, manages what she does.
So if I can dovetail on the question or the situation that you just gave and ask you a question, Dr. Danita. Is your emotional wellness something that happens and stays with you, or can it be a temporary unwellness?
Absolutely. So that's where you think about, if we think about mental health as in good mental health or poor mental health, there are some signs that you can be mindful of if you have a decline in your mental health, if you notice it's starting to shift. And like we said before, good mental health is being able to learn, feel, make decisions, and act and manage your positive and your negative emotions well and in a healthy way.
Okay.
Times when you will realize, or examples of when it may start to decline, if something is happening in your life and you start to notice that you're a very focused person, but now you're very easily distracted. Bingo. Or you're worrying more often than you had been previously. Yeah. If you have difficulty making decisions, like you just can't decide, and you're normally, you can make those snap judgments, and it's like, hey, and you're always good at that. You'll notice that that's when those are your identifiers or your yellow flags to say, okay, wait a minute, let me take a step back and maybe do a check to see, how am I doing emotionally? What's happening around me? If typically I have folks where they are very busy, like that's their thing, to stay busy and to drive. And if they get to a point where the things that typically motivate them become more overwhelming for them, that is a sign that, okay, my mental health or my emotional wellness I need to do a self-check, because something's off right now, because I'm noticing that I'm not focused as much as I usually am, or I'm worrying more about things that I typically would not have fazed or bothered me before.
Now, I was going to ask you this, but one of our callers, Alma Gill, who's actually has a show here called Ask Alma. She said that I'm surprised by the fact that I was much better at mental health before COVID. During COVID, I can't seem to find my way. I do worry more now. And I was going to ask you, thank you, Alma. I was going to ask you, and how has your experience been with dealing with mental health during the pandemic? Has it been overwhelming or what?
So, me personally, or what I'm seeing in the field?
Oh, okay. No, I'm going to say in the field first.
Okay. So no, that's, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, very different.
What Alma, the topic that Alma just raised. In the past year, we've seen more folks entering and seeking out help and support for emotional wellness than we've seen before. Prior to the pandemic, telemental health was like an option. It was like, you can provide telemental health services if you like. Right. But once the pandemic hit, it was like a necessity that we needed to have these options, because no one could come out or seek help, or and it put people that nobody was prepared to be alone. So when you think about some of the things that can trigger your mental health to decline, loneliness, being isolated.
Yeah.
And this pandemic, that I think that's one of the top things that the pandemic has done to a lot of people is they've experienced a lot of loss, or they've been isolated from family members, friends. And if they don't have anyone in close proximity who live with them, we've seen like a decline in mental health across the board, from worrying, and one of the big ones is worrying as well, has increased for a lot of people in the past year, and has caused them to seek out support and help with just managing that excessive worry, or trying to figure out how they can deal with the feelings, overwhelming feelings of loneliness and isolation during the past year.
And fear. I mean, there's been an incredible amount of fear because of the pandemic. I have a question for you, Dr. Danita.
Yes.
With all the exposure that we're getting about police violence on the Black community, whether it be occurrences or court cases that are going in or coming out without guilty convictions, what sort of effect might that have on?
And I know we're talking, secondary trauma is a term.
Okay.
That is another factor that could contribute to the decline in mental health. Just the images, the bombardment of, televised, the trial that's happening, all of those things are contributing factors to a decline in mental health.
And we call this secondary trauma.
You said secondary, but one of our listeners, Keith J, he said collective trauma versus individual trauma. I'm not sure of what he meant. He just made the statement. So how do those two traumas play into one's mental health?
So individual trauma would be like direct trauma, somebody who's actually directly impacted by trauma. And collective or secondary trauma is something that, like, collective is what a group experiences, a trauma that's experienced by a particular group, like, people of color or Black people who are experiencing over an exaggerated rate of police brutality. That's collective to a particular group. So, but it still falls within that secondary or vicarious trauma. It may not directly impact us. We might not be in that car, but we identify with it.
Right.
And so therefore, to experience it or to see it repeatedly happening to your community is a collective trauma.
So that goes back to Vash's statement or question that would be a collective trauma. Am I correct when you asked the question or made the statement, Vash, about seeing the trial and things happen where people are not being convicted? Would that be considered a collective trauma?
According to Dr. Danita, yes. My question was, like, what sort of impact would that have, or should we expect to have? And to find out that it actually has a term, which is secondary trauma, is somewhat, relaxing to a degree, because it's like, all right, it's expected based on all of this.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question, Dr. Danita.
Yes.
What can we do, like, in our individual, as individuals who are not practitioners in the field of mental health or emotional wellness? What can we do to support more people getting awareness of emotional wellness or mental health? What is our individual role? And for our listeners out there, what can we do to really create a better?
Gotcha. First and foremost, me being a practitioner, I'm still a human being. So I practice what I preach, number one. And then I have discussing it, making it a topic that's not taboo, sharing what you do to manage your everyday stress. Or if you're having conversations about your day, what do you do that helps to relax you? What do you do to kind of step away and come back, whether that's a glass of wine or whether that's reading a book, a bath. But having a conversation, talking about it. If you think about trauma, we tend to avoid the things that either evoke pain or hurt, right? But if we're talking about those things that make us uncomfortable, it's the only way to kind of remove that taboo about emotional wellness or mental health is through talking about it. And then other things that the community does that I've participated in or help encourages, churches can do, churches have done like wellness workshops where they may have different gadgets or things to help people talk about mental health, and then little tools that they can use. You'll see people with the fidget things or the squishy balls that they have that you can use when you're at work, or switching out your chair at work for the little I don't know what the ball that you can sit on.
The ergonomic tools.
Help with your back. Anything that helps you. It's very individualized, and people have to find what works for them. There's no one size fits all to how you deal with day-to-day stressors. And so it's just about finding and collectively sharing with each other and having that conversation to make it okay for someone to actually go to that place of communication.
Great.
Wow.
Thank you.
I see a comment from a gentleman by the name of Bogart, and I know that this is a very special topic for him particularly. He asks, how do you start the conversation about mental well-being with family members who are not on board?
Checking in. Start small. Checking in just with how you're doing. A part of what we talked about with the stigma, but also the cultural barriers that we face is, if we all know, you don't talk outside of your family. Everything gets addressed within, but that's also how trauma doesn't get addressed or healed, is we keep things in, and that's what we're taught. But starting small with just asking about how they're doing, their well-being. Another big thing for me is changing the language, how you approach it. That can make the world of difference in how you approach things. If I had $1 for every time someone was labeled or described as crazy, it can shut something down so quick that it really hurts us as a community, and we're not able to talk about it even in our families. But I would just say start small with just checking in about, how you doing?
Yeah. Asking
those open-ended type questions where people can't just say, I'm fine, or, what was your day like?
Yeah.
If you could, say one thing that you wish didn't happen today, what would it have been? Or how did you address it or deal with it? But finding ways to ask questions that are not so directly tied to, okay, are you feeling sad today? It's not that direct, but you still get a sense of how somebody's doing emotionally, if there's something that may be going on. Sometimes I've had people that start, you utilize what we're taught. Some people start at church. I work and talk to pastors and ministers about knowing when their church community may come to them, because they might be the first line of someone doing a mental health check.
Right.
And knowing, and they are being trained a lot more in how to work with their parishioners as well, and also distinguishing when they've reached that point where it's like, okay, I've helped and done what I can, and maybe I need some more support. But having that pastor or minister as an ally, having that discussion with them, someone that they might trust or a family member that they trust, is going to be key. Even within a family, if they don't trust, nothing that you say is going to kind of penetrate or get them to see the benefit or the need for doing that emotional wellness check.
Got it.
Well, I'm going to tell you all right now, Donita, you're not going anywhere, because these comments are coming in here, ladies and gentlemen. And so, as you all know, we have a segment called What Y'all Said. Okay, so we are going to roll that right. We're going to roll right into what y'all said, and we're going to answer some of these questions that are coming up, because I'm seeing paragraphs over here. Okay, and let's start with Karen Spencer. She said, "How do you handle people who need help but don't get it. Example, the recent killing in Rock Hill. And I'm thinking that she's now. I'm forgive me, Karen. Is she talking about the football player?
I think so. Yeah.
Who killed his I don't know, were they family? His whole family. Okay, that's what she's talking about. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you deal with that?
How do you handle people who need help but don't get it? And unfortunately, Karen, what ends up happening is because we're talking about mental health, if we're not doing those checks, because you can't force people, we respect self-determination, so we can't force people to seek help, or we can't force family members to get help. But one of the things that if there were factors, and I don't know the whole story, if there were triggers, if there were things that were happening, see, we get the end result. We get, this is the end of what was the outcome. But were there actually red flags prior to this? Were there things that were happening and nobody did anything? Nobody said a word. I think when I heard the story today, the father said, "I just think he snapped." That says to me there was a buildup. So what was happening in this man's life where there was no one who said, you know what, we need to take him either to see a doctor, to the emergency room. And those, without having that information, right, it's really hard to know what was happening prior to him getting to that point, to know, was there something that could have been done, or, for him to get help? But ultimately it's the individual decision. And that's why the focus on mental health and emotional wellness and talking about it, to get people to the point to say, okay, it's like second nature. My mental health, my emotional wellness is no different than if I'm going to check my heart, if I'm going to check my blood pressure, if I'm going to check, my insulin levels. It's just a common part of that day to day. And we've been fighting that, that stigma for years. And it's gotten way better than it used to be, but there's always still work to be done to try to address it and get people to reach out when they do need help.
Well, a lot of people have coping mechanisms for dealing with stress. We're taught, we have the stigma on one side about mental, emotional wellness, but then there's the conditioning that we've been taught, which is hide it, don't show emotion, keep it inside, get over it, take the high ground. There's all these things that we're taught that keep us from being able to express our emotions. We're taught to cope. Can you talk to us about that?
So those would be, you said coping factors, that I would say that would be a lack of coping. It would be more of avoiding.
I guess,
what you described would be more of avoiding, or what we would say, or poor coping skills, where we were taught poor coping skills versus addressing those negative emotions or addressing those stressors and being taught. And coping skills have to be taught. We're not born with coping skills. Those are modeled for us and those are taught to us. And so how we manage those day-to-day stresses, how we manage our mental health, like I said, always think about mental health as your thinking, your feelings, and your actions. How are you managing your emotions? Those are modeled and taught to us. And if they're not, then where do we learn them? Where do we pick those up from?
Yeah.
Right. Well, we're gonna get to. I see. We're gonna read some more questions. But your mother, Edith Lee, is on here. She said hello and listening from this discussion. She says she's learning from this discussion. She says, "Awesome panel. Thanks, guys. Dr. Holmes, I love you all." Let me see. Randy, I saw Eric Jessup. He said he has a question. Mental health is now popular, but what happens, especially in the Black community, if we end up on a government list where now our parental rights, Second Amendment rights, and other citizen issues are at risk because now you're crazy and your case gets red flagged? Can we answer that quickly?
Well, when it comes to mental health, any services provided to a licensed mental health provider is privileged. So it would take a lot as far as a government list, I've never reported to any governmental agency in my 20 plus years of practicing. And I've even fought going to court in having to go to court because it was privileged communication. So I wouldn't even testify in any court proceedings as it related to my my clients in court. So I even would consult an attorney, even if I had a particular client who had a risk of having to go to court for anything. I would always consult with an attorney. And in my 20 plus years, I've never testified in any way that would harm any of my clients. And I've never had to report to any government agency or, for anybody to be placed on the list because it's confidential. Mm-hmm. And it's a violation for me of my license if I breach that confidentiality.
Okay. Thank you, Donita. We have Rita Burns here. Rita says that sometimes when I express how I'm doing as it relates to my mental health, it allows others the space to express how they are truly feeling. And that's what you were saying earlier, which is yes. True, and yeah. And I agree with you, Rita. I mean, I have a circle of friends who know my journey. And so for me to be, let them and be that transparent about, me being okay with getting therapy, what led me to therapy, what led me to taking care of my mental health, I just spread the word. And then it also helps to look the part too, if you're walking the talk. You know what I'm saying? It's no, you can't like speak it and then all of a sudden someone's looking at you doing something different than what you're saying. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. It just doesn't make sense. So thank you. Okay. Oh, now Sean came in a little later, but I think it was on the Rock Hill thing. He said, I think that people don't help because they don't understand mental problems. Maybe they don't want to, or maybe they just can't. And he's talking about the Rock Hill scenario. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's definitely true. Part of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Randy asked a question. He said, what are the key identifiers for depression versus just being stressed?
Good question. And and people will typically want to interchange those. Stress is stress. Stress is anything that that may happen in your life that causes some type of upset for you. But depression, everybody gets depressed. So it's an emotion. So everybody gets depressed. I think considering clinical depression, that's something when we talk about later, when we distinguish it from a mental illness. But when we talk about just depression in general, depression and sadness, everybody experiences it. If you experience a loss, you experience sadness and you have a depressed mood. That is something that is typical in response to a specific trigger or event, right?
Like loss. Someone eats your ice cream.
Oh, that could be very saddening, and it could just send you in a funk, right?
Yes, exactly.
Especially if your ice cream is something that you hold dear to you.
You go to the refrigerator, boom, it's gone.
Exactly.
Yes,
absolutely. So sadness and depression is a part of our emotional wellness package. Is a part of our emotions. It's just a range that we have. So stressors, you can have stress and not get sad from the stress you're dealing with, but depression and sadness is triggered by a specific event or circumstance, and that's okay. We're not talking about clinical depression. We're just talking about depressed mood, and everybody experiences a depressed mood in response to something. Yeah. If you lost anyone, that's a sad or depressed mood.
Right.
Well, I mean, we're near the end of this segment, Donita. First of all, thank you so much. I'm going to read one more question, and it is from Don Johnson. He says, "How do we get past the anger and resentment associated with being poorly treated by former coworkers and managers due solely to preconceptions of race and age?"
See, so Don is asking a question that goes into organizational psychology. And if I started talking about code switching, we could have a whole segment just talking about that question. That question alone.
Okay.
I guess that means we have to bring you back.
That means we got to bring you back. So thank you, Don.
But to address the anger part of it, again, that comes to mental health again, and what we talked about with, how do you address and deal with that anger? To prevent some of the things we've seen on TV, right? With everybody is dealing with some of the same things you're mentioning now with leadership or coworkers. One of the factors I said for a decline in mental health, I actually have code switching is one of those factors that people of color have to deal with on a daily basis in the workplace. And so dealing or getting past that anger is to work through it. And that's a part of your emotional wellness is what are you going to do with that anger? What can you do to cope with that anger? Whether you do your own coping mechanism, as Vash mentioned before, whether you exercise, how do you exert that energy that comes with the anger that may be built up in addressing or dealing with that on a day-to-day basis? Where's your outlet? How do you cope with that is a part of your mental wellness or your emotional wellness. If you can't find things that on your own that have helped you work through it, then I would encourage finding someone you trust that you can talk to, whether that's someone that's a family member or friend, or don't count out a clinician like myself to run things by, to talk through or work through that anger, and to talk about what are some things that can be tried to kind of get you through. Because the work part, as long as you have to make a living for the moment, you still have to cope and deal with going into that environment every day. So that part of it is not changing. So which means that you are going to have to find something that helps you deal with or address your emotional wellness, so that you don't get to the point where that anger is so overwhelming that your mental health declines and you respond to it in a way that's not typical for you.
Right.
Well, first of all, Dr. Donita Holmes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
For bringing your level of expertise to our first Manage Your Health series, on mental health awareness. Thank you so much. We do hope that you will come back, because this topic, this is going to grow. And thanks to you. And for those of you who are turning on, who came in after we started the conversation, this is my second oldest niece. And she's the doctor, and I love her very much. So thank you very much for coming on, Dr. Donita.
Thank you.
And we hope that you will join us. Don't go away. We're going to come and get you again. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bye. Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you all for your questions, guys. Wasn't that great? I mean, people.
Oh, that was so engaging.
This was like so.
We could have talked about that for hours. I mean, she's so engaging. She's so brilliant, and I just loved. I was in awe of the discussion. So. Well, I'm so glad we brought her.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you all. We're going to move into our next segment of the show, and it is Black Excellence, ladies and gentlemen, that we have been doing this series for about 4 weeks now, and you all have said that you like it. And today we are going to show our appreciation or recognize people in the medical field. So we're going to start with Mr. Jacques Whitfield.
Cool. And so today I am honoring Dr. May Carol Jemison. She was born on October 17th, 1956. She's not only a medical doctor, she's an astronaut. In fact, she became the first Black woman to travel into space, where she served as a mission specialist aboard the Space Shuttle Endeavour. All of us remember that famous picture of her. She was born in Alabama, raised in Chicago. She graduated from Stanford University with degrees in chemical engineering, as well as African and African American studies. Then she earned her medical degree from Cornell University and became a doctor for the Peace Corps in Liberia and Sierra Leone, and worked as a general practitioner before joining NASA, where she became an astronaut. She is near and dear to me. I loved her story. And she is, when my grandmother had flight clubs, she was one of the practitioners that came back and spoke to the students. And so I was so appreciative to the work that she did there. She gave autographed pictures to the students. It was absolutely amazing. And so she is my salute to Black excellence in the medical field.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you. And next we have Mr. Vash Bodhi and his Black Excellence recipient.
Well, today I am celebrating Dr. James Mccune Smith. So he was born to a mother who was a slave. back in 1813, he was born in New York. His mother was brought to New York by her then slave master, Samuel Smith. But because James was born in New York and New York had adopted some abolitionist rules, children born to slave parents were considered free, except for some indentured servitude that they had to do until they were adults. He went to school in Manhattan and was a great student. And after he graduated, he really wanted to go and be a doctor. And he applied to Columbia University and Geneva Medical College. But, back in, 1820, they were not accepting Black candidates. So a school in Scotland, University of Glasgow, they actually recruited him because they wanted to help prove that Black people could be doctors. So he went to Scotland and got his medical degree. He got his bachelor's in 1835. He got his master's in 1836, and he had his medical degree by 1837. Ooh. He then did his residency internships in Paris. So when he came back to the United States in 1837, he was a hero in the Black community. So not only did he help do things in the community as a philanthropist, but he also helped to dispel a lot of the myths that were out about how African Americans were less than because of the shapes of their brains or anything about their intelligence, et cetera. He was actually able to dispel those. He was the first African American physician who was trained in a university. Yes, he was also the first Black person to run an apothecary or a pharmacy. And he was the first Black American doctor to be published in American medical journals, even though he was never, ever admitted to the American Medical Association. Mm. He was quoted to have said, "I have striven to obtain education at every sacrifice and every hazard, and to apply such education to the good of the common country." Dr. Mccune Smith was a light that enabled African Americans to pursue their educational goals and to strive for equality. So we celebrate Dr. James Mccune Smith.
Thank you, Vash. Thank you.
That was great, Vash.
Thank you. Well, I am the last person to pay tribute to someone who is very, very special to me. You heard me mention that I have 3 doctors in my family. This is the first, my eldest niece. Her name is Dr. Dewan V. King. She's the pediatric ambulatory care hospitalist at Mercy Medical Center and volunteer teaching facility at the University of Maryland Medical Center. This is her first picture before when she her first picture as a doctor. She graduated in 1995 from the real HU. She keeps saying, I didn't go to Howard, so I don't know what she's talking about. But she graduated from the real HU. And that's also in 1995, and that's also where she did her residency. She's going to be mad with me on this picture that I'm going to take you on this journey. This picture here that we're looking at, that is little Alvin right there standing next to my favorite brother, which is her father named Donald, who I looked like. And he was my favorite brother, and he was the one who I looked up to about everything. So for him to ask me to be in his wedding and her to be his first daughter, I just mimicked, or everything he did, I became very close to him. And of course, being at that age, my niece being born close to me, I wanted to show this picture to see where it all started. After Dewan was born, this is a picture of her and her brother Don. We were very close. We called her Twigs, and that was because her hair kept standing up on her head whenever she decided to, whenever she did something. You could braid her hair, comb her hair, do whatever, but it would always stand on her head. So we gave her the nickname of Twigs. Okay, so this is her and her brother, and this is also me standing next to her on our Impala that when we were little kids. And if you can see, her braids are sticking out right there. But as a kid, she was always very inquisitive. She was always the person that, she had a very rational disposition about everything at a very young age. She asked questions, and she always actually kind of had an answer for everything. Even at that age, you see, she's the only girl right there. she was definitely the alpha in the bunch. Okay. And as we moved on through life, she has become a mother. She married a wonderful man by the name of Bo. And when she got married, the story is my brother, who I look to so much, 2 weeks before her wedding, my brother died. And this was he died right around her rehearsal dinner. And so she asked me to coordinate one of her, her wedding plans, which was her reception. And these are pictures of her wedding, of which, again, I'm just so grateful that she hones in on all of my skills. Her mother, right here in between, Linda, was the woman in the wedding picture, is responsible for her deciding to go to medical school and to become a doctor. Her mother influenced her on every decision that she's had to make. And still to this day, I hold her mother in high regards. Linda is one of my favorite people. So these next pictures are her family, her sons, who are Bryson and Ian, who are my great nephews. They both play basketball. She adores her children. Do you hear what I'm saying? She adores her children, and without fail, anything that when you talk about mental health awareness, believe me, she instills it in her two boys. And so I love her for that. But she's also a very good caretaker. My sister here has stage 4 cancer. She is also, in addition to doing her work every day, being a mother, taking care of the boys, she's my sister's health care provider. Caretaker. She tells my sister has stage 4 cancer, as I mentioned, and she gives her the answers to all the questions for us and my family, and keeps us all up to date on everything, in addition to supporting us in all of our endeavors, ladies and gentlemen. So this is a picture that I hold dear to my heart. This is my family. You see Dr. Darnita standing to the second to the right. They all support me in everything that I do. My niece takes time out of every day to do that. So I really appreciate her. And again, I told you she's an alpha. She sent a letter to President Obama because during his first term, he was passing the middle class tax initiative, and she didn't like what he was doing. So she sent a letter to him, and they sent an invitation to her to come to the White House to meet him and stand behind him as he gave his speech. And of course, she asked me for fashion tips. So I'm going to leave it at that for that. But so in closing, I'm going to say something that I got today, so I have to read it. Dr. DeJuan King, has been named a top doctor in Baltimore Magazine. This came out today, recognizing her as one of the best pediatricians in the Baltimore region. She is the recipient of other numerous awards, including the Meade Johnson Award for Best Pediatric Scientific Sections and the Best Pediatric Intern and Resident in Ambulatory and Emergency Pediatrics. Dr. King was also awarded 2 National Minority Neuroscience Fellowships from the National Institute of Mental Health. Ladies and gentlemen, my recipient of Black Excellence tonight in medicine is my niece, Dr. DeJuan B. King. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was so great. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Oh my God, y'all. Can y'all believe that we are at the end of the show? And we're at the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. Oh my God. Vash and Jacques, thank you for introducing this series tonight. Before we go, ladies and gentlemen, though, we have to tell you that next week we're continuing the series. Is that right? We continue the series. And
I do believe we are.
And it's going to be Black men and diabetes, preventing it, managing it. And we have a special guest from the American Diabetes Association joining us, ladies and gentlemen. That will be next week, so please tune in. So before we go, we're going to leave you with our words of the week. Never, ever, ever, never, ever let a stumble in the road be the end of your journey. And with that, we say thank you for joining us tonight on He Said. Thank you guys for joining us, Vash and Jacques. And Dr. Darnita, are you still here? Is Dr. Darnita still in the back? There she is. Thank you for joining us tonight. We really appreciate what you did. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Okay, you guys have a great week, and we will see you next week on He Said, He Said, He Said. Bye.
Take care.
Bye.